The SOS that changed everything. The message came through the static, weak and broken, but still enough to send a chill down Commander Elias Carter's spine. Help us. They're coming. Unstoppable. We want. Then, silence. Carter stood in the dim glow of his command deck, eyes fixed on the repeating transmission. The distress call had been bouncing across space for weeks, ignored by most of the Galactic Council. The official reports called it a minor planetary conflict. Not worth their time. But Carter knew better. There was something wrong with this call. He could hear the fear in the voice. Behind him, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Voss, spoke up. "Sir, the Council has already dismissed this. They think it's just another dying world." Carter didn't turn. His fingers hovered over the controls, playing the message again. Unstoppable. That word stuck in his mind. "And what do you think, Lieutenant?" he asked. Voss hesitated. "I think no one sends a distress call unless they truly believe they're about to die." Carter finally turned, his expression set like stone. "Then we're going." The crew exchanged nervous glances. The Galactic Council had strict rules against interfering with planets outside their jurisdiction. But Carter didn't care about rules. He cared about survival. If something out there was truly unstoppable, then humanity needed to know what it was. "Prepare the Zephyr fleet," he ordered. "We leave in 1 hour." A dead world. The trip to Decker 7 took 3 days. The moment they entered orbit, Carter felt something was off. The planet was supposed to be home to billions, a thriving world of cities and trade routes. But now, it was silent. The sensors picked up no life signs, no radio transmissions, just the cold, dead air of a planet that had been wiped clean. "Sir, I'm not detecting any power sources," Voss reported. "No defenses, no emergency beacons. Nothing." Carter frowned. That didn't make sense. Even after an invasion, there should be something left. Refugees, survivors, at least wreckage. "Send a drone," he ordered. The small probe descended into the atmosphere, its cameras feeding live footage back to the ship. The images that appeared on the screen made Carter's blood run cold. The cities were still standing. There was no fire, no craters, no collapsed buildings. But they were empty. Streets, homes, spaceports, completely abandoned. "What the hell happened here?" whispered one of the officers. Voss adjusted the drone's signal. "I don't understand. If this was an attack, where are the bodies?" Carter didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the screen as the drone floated through the empty streets. The wind carried dust through the silent avenues. There were signs of struggle. Shattered glass, overturned vehicles, bloodstains on walls. But not a single corpse. It was as if every living thing had simply vanished. Then, the drone's feed glitched. Static. For a few seconds, the video cut out. When it returned, something had changed. The street was no longer empty. In the middle of the road, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It was humanoid but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its face featureless. It wasn't there before. It had just appeared. The drone's warning lights flared. "Motion DTKTE." Carter leaned forward, heart pounding. "Pull the drone back." Voss tried to reverse the controls, but the drone didn't respond. It remained locked in place, its camera feed frozen on the figure. Then the screen went black. "Sir," a technician said, his voice shaky. "The drone is gone." Carter's jaw tightened. Something was down there. Something that wasn't showing up on their sensors. Then, a new sound filled the command deck. A voice, a whisper, crackling through the speakers. "Run." And then, every ship system shut down at once. The lights flickered. The consoles died. Every screen went dark, leaving the crew in the cold silence of deep space. And outside, in the vast darkness below, something moved. Carter clenched his fists. The distress signal wasn't just a call for help. It was a trap. The ghosts of Decra 7. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the command deck. Every system on the Zephyr's Wrath had gone dead in an instant. Engines, weapons, even the life support displays. Commander Elias Carter's fingers tightened around the console. Report. Lieutenant Sarah Voss worked the controls, her voice tense. Nothing's responding, sir. Power's been drained completely. The crew exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't a simple malfunction. Something had shut them down. And outside, in the endless void of space, something was moving. Through the reinforced observation windows, Carter saw them. Shadows shifting against the faint glow of Decra 7's dead surface. No ships, no signals. Just motion. Unnatural. Silent. Then the whisper came again, faint but clear, crackling through the ship's emergency comms. Run. A cold chill ran down Carter's spine. He'd spent years in battle, fought in wars where planets burned. But this was something else. Voss' fingers flew across the unresponsive controls. Sir, if we can't restart the engines, we're dead in space. Carter exhaled sharply. Then we restart them manually. He turned to Chief Engineer Patel, who was already ahead of him. On it, sir. But whatever hit us, it didn't just shut us down. It drained us. Like something pulled the energy right out of our systems. Patel's words sent a fresh wave of unease through the crew. Because energy didn't just disappear. Carter straightened. Get to the core. Bring us back online. Patel nodded and sprinted towards the lower decks with his engineering team. Then something slammed into the ship. The entire command deck shook. Metal groaned under pressure. The lights flickered violently. A deep, resonating sound echoed through the hull, like something alive was brushing against the ship. Sir, one of the crew shouted. Something just attached itself to the outer hull. Carter moved fast. Bring up exterior cameras. Voss managed to reroute emergency power to a single working display. The grainy feed came to life, showing the dark metal surface of their own ship. At first, it seemed empty. Then, the shadows shifted. Something crawled across the hull. It didn't move like a creature. It didn't move like a machine. It was wrong. Limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. Its surface constantly shifting, as if it was made of liquid and shadow at the same time. And then, it turned. No eyes, no face, but it was looking at them. A low humming noise filled the deck, and suddenly, the crew couldn't move. Their bodies froze in place, not by force, but by some unnatural presence gripping their nerves. Even Carter, with all his training and experience, felt an icy paralysis creep through him. Then it spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in their minds. You were not meant to hear the call. Carter clenched his jaw, fighting against the invisible force. His mind screamed against the pressure, against the overwhelming sense of being watched by something he couldn't comprehend. You were not meant to come. The whispers felt ancient, endless, wrong. And then, in an instant, the presence vanished. The ship systems blazed back to life. Consoles beeped, engines roared, lights stabilized. The paralyzing force lifted. The screen flickered, and the thing on the hull was gone. The only proof it had ever been there was the thin layer of black residue left behind, dissolving into space. Voss gasped, pulling in a shaky breath. Sir, what the hell was that? Carter didn't answer. He turned to the comms officer. Did we record that? The officer nodded weakly. Carter's expression hardened. The distress call from Decra 7 wasn't just a plea for help. It was a warning, and humanity had just stepped into something far worse than an invasion. Into the void. The Zephyr's Wrath drifted in silence, its engines running at full power, but going nowhere. Commander Carter stood at the center of the command deck, eyes locked on the black residue left behind by whatever had lashed onto the ship. The ship's AI, ALIS, scanned the remains. Unknown compound, organic and non-organic properties. No match in the Galactic database. Lieutenant Voss exhaled sharply. Sir, we have full power, but we're stuck. Carter's brow furrowed. What do you mean stuck? Voss swallowed. Engines are running, but we aren't moving. It's like space itself is holding us in place. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Space didn't just hold ships. This wasn't normal. Then, something changed. A soft thump. Then another. From the lower decks, Patel's voice crackled through the comms. Engineering to bridge. We have a problem. Carter tapped his earpiece. What kind of problem? A pause. Then, I think something got inside. The entire bridge went still. Voss whispered, That's impossible. The hull was sealed. Carter's jaw tightened. Send a security team down. Full lockdown procedures. He grabbed his pulse rifle from the weapons locker and strode toward the lift. Sir, Voss called, you're not seriously going down there yourself. I don't send my people into the dark alone, Carter said. You have the bridge. The doors sealed behind him. The lower decks. The emergency lights cast everything in a dull red glow. The hum of the ship's power core vibrated through the walls. Carter moved with precision, rifle aimed, scanning every corridor. The security team, led by Surgeon Grant, advanced beside him. Then they saw it. A trail of black residue smeared across the walls and floor, leading deeper into the maintenance sector. Patel met them at the entrance, face pale. We heard something moving. A distant scraping sound echoed from the shadows ahead. Not metal on metal, not the usual groan of the ship's framework. Something wet, something alive. Carter motioned for silence. The team pressed forward, weapons ready. They turned a corner and froze. The lights flickered, revealing a figure standing at the far end of the hallway. Tall, wrong, shifting. It wasn't fully there, like it was flickering between two realities. Then, its face took shape. No eyes, no mouth, just a human shape, twisted and broken, its head tilting at an impossible angle. And then it spoke. You shouldn't have come. The lights died. Darkness swallowed them whole. And something moved. Fast. The silent war. Total darkness. The emergency lights failed. The ship, once humming with life, now felt like a tomb. Commander Carter gripped his rifle tighter. His breath was steady, but his pulse wasn't. Then, from the blackness, came a sound. Not footsteps, not machinery. A whisper. You weren't supposed to hear the call. Something moved. Carter's instincts kicked in. Fire. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark. The security team unleashed a storm of rounds. But there was nothing there. Then, a scream. One of the soldiers, Private Lee, was pulled into the shadows. His body twisted unnaturally, his limbs contorting before he vanished. Silence. Then, a faint dripping sound. Patel whispered, What the hell is this? Carter's jaw tightened. He activated his visor's night vision. The corridor was empty. No body. No blood. Just shadows. Then his HUD glitched. The screen flickered, distorted as if something was crawling through the data itself. Leave. The whisper again. But this time, it wasn't just in Carter's ears. It was inside his mind. He staggered, clutching his head. Images flashed. A world on fire, a dead city, a sky torn open by something that should never exist. And then, a symbol. Ancient. Alien. Human. Patil caught him before he collapsed. Commander. Carter forced himself to breathe. We need to get back to the bridge. Now. The retreat. They moved fast. No talking. No hesitation. Just pure survival. But the ship had changed. Corridors that once led to the bridge now looped endlessly. Doors opened to places they didn't belong. The Zephyr's wrath was becoming something else. A trap. Voss' voice crackled through the comms. "Sir, you're not on our scanners anymore. Where the hell are you?" Carter keyed his comm. "We're trying to get back, but the ship." A sharp beep interrupted him. A new signal. Not from the ship. From outside. A distress beacon. But not human. Carter's blood ran cold. The original SOS they'd followed to Decra 7 was still there. But this one was different. It wasn't a call for help. It was a warning. And it was coming from something big. Something that had just woken up. Outside the ship. On the bridge, Voss stared at the new signal in horror. A massive object was emerging from the darkness beyond Decra 7. Not a ship. Not a fleet. A graveyard. Thousands of dead ships, floating as if frozen in time. And at the center, something moved. Something that had been waiting. For them. The Forgotten War. On the bridge, Voss' hands trembled as she magnified the view. A graveyard of ships floated in the abyss beyond Decra 7. Thousands of them. Some bore alien designs never seen before. Others looked human. But the center of it all was wrong. A swirling mass of shadows and metal, shifting like it was alive. Then, the distress signal changed. It wasn't an SOS anymore. It was a message. A voice crackling with static. Old. Tired. Human. If you can hear this, you are already dead. The signal cut off. Silence hung over the bridge. Voss swallowed. "Commander, there are human ships out there." "How?" Patel's voice came through the comms. "Sir, you need to hear this. We scanned the wreckage. Some of those ships are centuries old, but their logs say they were last active yesterday." Carter's pulse quickened. That's impossible. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Below deck, Carter and his team moved fast, pushing through corridors that shifted around them. The ship was no longer the Zephyr's wrath. It was something else. The whispers had stopped, and that was worse. Then, Patel halted. "Sir, look." A door had changed. Instead of the standard bulkhead, it was now old. Rusted, and the nameplate on it. It wasn't their ship's registry. It was from a human warship lost 300 years ago. The UEG Revenant, the ship that vanished in the first interstellar war. Carter exhaled slowly. They weren't just trapped. They were in the middle of a war that never ended. A war the galaxy had forgotten. And someone, had been waiting for them to find it. Back on the bridge, Voss watched in horror as something stirred in the ship graveyard. Bodies, floating between the wrecks. Thousands of them. Human. Alien. Frozen in space. But they were moving. And then, one by one, they turned to look at the Zephyr's wrath. Then the voice returned. "Turn back. Or join us." And this time, it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The voices of the forgotten. Carter's grip on his rifle tightened as he stared at the rusted door, labeled UEG Revenant. It shouldn't exist. But here it was. Patel swallowed. "Sir, what if we're not the first ones to answer that distress call?" Carter exhaled. Only one way to find out. He pressed his hand against the door, and it opened. Inside the ghost ship, the air felt wrong. Not stale. Not rotten. Just old. Dim emergency lights flickered as Carter's team stepped into the corridor. The walls were scared by battle, charred from plasma burns. And yet, there were no bodies, only shadows. Then, the sound of breathing. Patel swung his rifle around. "Who's there?" No answer. Carter activated his visor scanner. There's no life signs. And yet, the breathing continued. It was close. Carter's radio crackled. "Help. Us." The voice was human, but broken, warped. Then, the emergency lights flared, and suddenly, they weren't alone. The forgotten soldiers, figures stood at the far end of the corridor. Human soldiers. Their armor was ancient, dented, and scorched. Their helmets were cracked, revealing pale, lifeless faces. But their eyes, they were awake, watching, waiting. Carter's heart pounded. Identify yourselves. Silence. Then, one of them stepped forward. His voice echoed, as if spoken by 1,000 mouths. You don't belong here. Patel raised his rifle. Sir, they're not reading as alive or dead. They're just there. Carter clenched his jaw. What happened to you? The soldier's head tilted, like he was remembering. We answered the distress call. Just like you. We fought. We won. And then... He paused. We never left. Then his gaze locked onto Carter. And neither will you. Outside the ship, the graveyard awakens. On the Zephyr's wrath, Voss screamed into the comms. Commander, get out of there. Now, the ship graveyard wasn't empty anymore. The floating bodies had stirred, and one by one, they were turning toward the wrath. Their eyes glowed. And then, they moved. Not floating, not drifting. They were walking through space, straight for the ship. The final warning. Inside the Revenant, the soldier's voice hardened. You were never supposed to come here. The war isn't over. It never was. Run, or be part of it. Then the ship shook. Something massive was moving outside. Something older than the war itself. And it had just noticed them. The war that never ended. The Zephyr's wrath trembled. Alarms blared as the ship's sensors went wild. The floating bodies, the forgotten soldiers, were no longer just drifting. They were marching through the void, closing in. And then, beyond them, something huge began to emerge from the graveyard. A warship. Not a wreck. Not dead. Alive. Waiting. Watching. And it was not human. Inside the Revenant, Carter's breath was shallow. The soldier's hollow gaze never left him. This is your last chance. Leave, or stay and become one of us. Carter shook his head. We don't abandon our own. Who sent the distress call? The soldier hesitated. For the first time, something flickered in his empty eyes. We did. Patel's voice cracked. Sir, I think they're trapped. The war didn't just kill them. It made them part of something else. Carter clenched his jaw. If they sent the SOS, maybe we can break them out. Patel checked his scanner. Sir, the ship's core. There's something keeping them here. Something alive. Carter nodded. Then we ended. The heart of the war. They moved fast, deeper into the Revenant. The walls shifted, flickering between the past and present. 1 second a ruined battleship, the next, a pristine war machine preparing for battle. Then, at the center of it all, they found the core. A pulsing, shifting mass of metal and shadow, beating like a heart. And the moment Carter laid eyes on it, it spoke. Not with words, but with memories. He saw battlefields spanning centuries, soldiers fighting, dying, and then standing back up, never escaping, never resting, trapped in an endless war. The core wasn't just alive. It was the war itself, feeding on soldiers, keeping them fighting forever. And now it had Carter in its grip. The final choice. The Revenant shook violently. Voss' voice screamed over the comms. Commander, we have to go. Now. That warship is powering weapons. Patel turned to Carter. Sir, if we overload the core, it might break the loop. But we don't know what'll happen to them. The forgotten soldiers watched them silently. Waiting. Carter made his choice. He slammed the controls. Burn it down. The core screamed. Not in sound. In war. The ship came alive, flashing between battles long lost. Carter saw soldiers from 100 wars. Human, alien, forgotten. Then, they were free. Escape. The Revenant began to collapse. The ghost soldiers faded, their empty eyes finally closing. Voss' voice roared in his earpiece. Carter, Get out of there. Carter and Patel ran, barely making it back to the docking hatch before the ship ripped apart. As the Zephyr's wrath pulled away, the warship in the graveyard stirred. For a second, it seemed like it might pursue. But then, it stopped. The Forgotten War was over. Aftermath. Back on the bridge, Voss exhaled. What the hell was that? Carter stared at the wreckage, watching as the Revenant finally crumbled. Something that should have ended a long time ago. Patil sat down, exhausted. And the one's still out there. Carter's eyes darkened. We let the dead rest. But if that war ever starts again, he looked at the stars. Humanity will be ready. And as the Zephyr's wrath left the graveyard behind, the last echoes of the Forgotten War finally faded into silence.